All right. One of the other questions or concerns that comes up is assembling and disassembling the instrument. Also, what kind of accessories need to be used? So, Brian, why don't you tell us what you would recommend as far as being careful of the dangers of
Yeah,
assembly?
oboes are notoriously finicky and fragile. Even the well-made student models have some real crucial spots that we need to be careful of. So if your school owns your basic modified conservatory, that's what they're called, instrument, it's not going to have a low B flat key. It's going to look like this, have two holes on the side. This one's pretty basic. If it doesn't want to go on, always have cork grease handy. That's You need cork grease. So make sure that there's cork grease if this doesn't want to go on very easily. So I always tell the student, kind of gently put your hand over these keys that you would play here without putting pressure on this long rod. They want to grab down here a lot, and that'll bend this rod that's here, okay? It's really important not to bend this because then, your low B is not going to come out properly and your left hand E flat is not going to work. So I have them really gently put the hand over here without bending and then get that on there. So the bottom joint, the bell going onto the bottom joint is pretty basic, all right? So, but this is where we need to be very careful, putting the top joint on. If the kid is like depressing the keys on the bottom joint, especially the F sharp, you're raising the lever here. So if they're trying to twist the top joint on, they're going to bend that and possibly snap it off. So I like to have the kid put the instrument together about halfway like this, looking at the right side connection, this right side here, all right? This is the crucial one. And get that kind of lined up, and then I have them just push it straight down without depressing any keys, all right? This is another thing you might need cork grease for. And this right side connection here is the essential connection that must be lined up properly. Don't worry about this left side one. This only is for one trill, all right? It's not really important, especially for the beginning oboe player. So don't line this up. I have a lot of kids also come to me in their first lessons who only want to line it up from that way because they're right-handed and they put the oboe player looking at the left side like this. So they're going to line this up. But then this side is not lined up and they wonder why their B flat and C doesn't come out. All right. So it's very important that this is lined up properly because your F sharp key will depress that and raise this lever. And that's how you get the B flat and the C on the oboe, is by opening these vent keys. All right. So, but it is very important that they do not depress any keys on the bottom joint while they're putting the oboe together because they risk snapping this off or bending it terribly. And this is the essential one. The only difference or addition to this, when they get an oboe that has a low B flat key on it, the same thing. Have them be really careful about bending rods on the side. Make sure that it's not so tight they can't get it on. Have cork grease. And have them make sure they're not accidentally depressing the B flat key down here, because that's going to raise this lever that closes the key. And the same thing, they might accidentally bend that or break it by trying to put the bell on. So have them very gently and carefully. I'm doing it with an open palm so that I'm not pressing any keys. Have them line that up. And so that's so that the low B flat is lined up properly. Okay, so make sure that there's cork grease in the case when you're giving the oboe to the kid at the beginning of the school year. Make sure there's a tube of cork grease in there, and take the time to show them properly how to put it together the first few times, because they will bend and break keys. The oboes are fragile. So those are my two concerns, are those two connection points between the joints of the oboe.
And Brian and Brent, I'm sure you guys could probably just nod on this one. Both of you guys suggest a silk swab, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have both, depending on what I'm using it for. But yes, yeah, that's a very good option. The important thing is, to me, not necessarily the material, but that it has a drawstring on the end, or it's a non-pull-through swab that by the time the swab, let me get my oboe out here. By the time you start pulling the swab through the instrument, that the material is too thick and bunches, so that there is still plenty of swab hanging out the end of the instrument, so that you don't end up getting the swab jammed inside, which then you have to usually send your instrument away or take it to a repair technician to get it out. The disasters that have come from parents trying to drill a swab out, from taking a crochet hook, truly, I've seen it all. There is nothing I haven't seen. And the silk swab, make sure that it just has a tail on the end, so that if it gets stuck, you can pull it back out. The current swab I'm using is a cotton swab, and there's no way it would ever pull through the instrument. And so it would never get stuck inside without having something to pull out the opposite direction. So to me, it's not necessarily, I mean, people are very particular about the material. I'm not necessarily. It's more that you have a swab that you're not going to be spending $150 to get it removed, when you could have spent $15 to get the swab that was correct, or a swab that wouldn't get stuck.
Great. While you have those handy, Brian, why don't you have the swab handy? Why don't you show taking the oboe apart and cleaning it, if you would, please?
Right. Now, this is the standard swab that a lot of us use. It does have the pull tail at the end, and it's really important that your kids know to look for knots, all right? Because they're going to bunch this up in the case, and then when they take it out, they're not going to pay attention, and there's going to be a knot in the top of the swab here, and they're going to try to pull it through their oboe, and it's going to get stuck in there. The very top of the board.
Students, this is us too.
This is us too. I mean, I was playing Carmen in the pit in the opera at professional performance just a few years ago. I go to swab out my oboe really fast before an English horn solo, and it got stuck. And it didn't have a tail. I had to play the rest of the first act on the English horn and transpose it. And then I spent the entire intermission trying to get the swab out of the top joint. It was a disaster. And so it happens to pros. So this is something we all have to watch for, is look for knots in the swab. Make sure there's never a knot in there. So what I suggest for beginners, because there's a tendency when they see this long chain, they're just going to want to like run the whole thing through and just be done, you know? But then it could get stuck. If there's anything wrong, it could get stuck. Even with the pull tie, it's just very dangerous. So what I tell even the beginners to do is carefully take the top joint off. Again, I'm not squeezing. I'm just applying enough pressure to be able to pull it apart without squeezing keys. Don't ever squeeze the keys. You're going to bend them. And then this has a weighted end with a chain on it. You see, some of them come like this, but find that weighted end, put it through, and then have them pull it only about that much. You know, just don't take any chances with it getting stuck. And then go back and forth a couple times. All right. And then I have them pull it back out the way they put the swab in, just in case there's something they missed. You know, there could be a knot in there that they missed, and it'll get stuck at the last second of trying to pull it through. And when it's jammed way up at the top here, that's the hardest part for the repair person to get it out. and you risk damaging the bore and ruining the instrument. And so you could leave the bell on, that's fine. Have them leave the bell on, but do the same thing. Now this is different because this is really big at the top of the bottom joint here. So for this one, have them drop the weighted chain through. And then this, I usually have them put it in their lap and then run it through a couple times. And I'm actually pushing down on it. I can't really see it, but I'm like pushing down on the swab on both sides because the water stream is going to go down the back of the instrument. So in order to dry that, I need to have contact. So I'm having them pull it down. And then you could pull this all the way through. And I do that a couple times. And if you're not sure if you got it, just look through and so you could see the water stream if it's still there. But yes, please, 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 the most important thing is to have check for knots. And it's usually best to have them not try to pull the swab completely through the top joint. Make sure they're backing it up. And I have to tell myself that all the time too, because, like Brent said, that happens to us too. You're in a hurry, you're just trying to get somewhere else, you have another gig or something, and you're going too fast, and there you go, it's stuck. And it's really a nightmare to get it out sometimes. So that they must be very careful with that, with swabbing.
Thank you, Brian.